James Mirtle, senior managing editor at The Athletic, someone who would probably be very sad they decentralized the draft. What's up, brother?
Only because I love going, and I've been to so many of them. I've probably been to like 12 drafts. It's such a great event to go to, and that would be my only sadness. It makes sense though, right? Like none of the other sports do it the way the NHL does.
Yeah. Okay. NHL. Borrow other things from the other leagues. Okay. Like you've got a cool thing that people like and that no one ever thought of. And then they went, well, it's expensive. And then I read, and I think it was CJ's piece actually. He was like, some guy said it's too loud, and we got a text anyway. I went, oh, you got a text, eh? That's a toffee. Boy, then we better shut her down, pal. Just a self-inflicted wound by the NHL again, where I get it. And by the way, if you do this, do it silently. Don't throw it out there for the court of public opinion. Like, obviously fans are going to hate change. Duh. I could have told you that, Gary.
Yeah. I mean, they tried to do it quietly, right? It's just it got leaked out from the I know that Nashville, for them, the Nashville draft was a huge logistical mess. Like, that's why they ended up having the draft. I think it was on Wednesday and Thursday because there was like a NASCAR race there and there were no hotels.
Because people there were like, oh, yeah, right, hockey. We forgot about that. The 32 on the list of things to do in the city.
Tons of flights were canceled coming in, and there was all the people trying to get to the draft from Europe. It was a complete mess, and so anyway,
here's the solution for the NHL teams. I got some suggestions for you. Number one, maybe start with just paring down the number of people that actually need to be there because you got 88 people at a table, and so if it's a logistical nightmare, maybe pick and choose, right? Like, hey, guess what? Yeah. If you feel like your general manager doesn't need to be there and that they're texting anyways, make an executive decision as an organization not to send the person. Reward some of your other people. I love the look of the NHL, how it is different, how it does feel like, even though this year, was there even a trade in the first round? I don't think there was. I don't think there was even like a fake crap trade.
Remember, it was really quiet in round one.
Yeah, it was. It was crap. It was terrible. But you know what? As a fan, as a viewer, I love the illusion of all these guys are on the floor together and they're wheeling and dealing and they're down there and they're face to face. And it's now maybe somebody has a drink and they go, you know what? Screw it. Let's make that deal. Put her there, partner. I like that. I like that idea. It's visually appealing, minus whatever Arizona does every year that embarrasses their organization further with the uniform. We're the fun team. It's like, oh. It's never good. And the flashbacks I get to JFJ and his tenure in Toronto. But overall, I just think this is such a stupid one. If it's the costs, figure out the costs. If it's logistics, limit some of the people. But yeah, to kind of have this one be the complainy thing, I just think is lame. I think it's a lame look for the league. I'm sorry.
Well, the NHL doesn't have a single event where they get everyone together. So
correct.
This is the only one.
All-star.
As an organization at The Athletic, we bring all of our staff to the draft, and we have, everyone gets together. It's the only time we do it all year. So I have to rethink that if no one's all of a sudden going.
You know what? This is just a further extension of the death of office parties. Like, we used to have office parties here. Not anymore. Now it's like you get invited to a lobby for cake. It's like, woo. Well,
COVID changed things. COVID changed some things, and some stuff didn't come back.
Yeah, office parties did not come back. They left. They were gone. It was like, but that was before COVID. Like you'd go to an office party and they started really hot. They were awesome. They were great for bringing people together. Now it's like, or then it became, here's one drink ticket, and then it was like, here's your cake, lobby cake for everyone. Hooray! Anyway. Don't do that, NHL. You got a cool thing. Just keep the cool thing going. Stop being cheap and continue to satiate fans. I tried for a second. I tried to get there, and I went, maybe this is the case for this, and it's cost cutting, and no. All of it is stupid. Just do the thing that you normally do. Okay, before I get into Leafs, I had these two topics for you that I wanted to get out of the way. All right, so Colorado's off to a hot start. So is Vegas. And actually, I watched a little bit of Colorado, and they looked really, really good. So I didn't watch as much of Vegas so far this season because I don't know. It's just something about Vegas. Maybe it's the jerseys. Maybe it's everything around the team. They've never been the appealing regular season team to me. But I saw this on Puckpedia. 14 teams in the NHL, James. They cannot do what right now?
Recall a player?
Correct. Not
right.
Can't recall a single player. It is just cap hell. And this is how I'm not trying to make excuses for what's going on with the Toronto Maple Leafs right now. But I was thinking about this as I was watching some of these games around the league, because this is my favorite time of the year where I'm flipping around. I'm doing, center ice And I'm just going, this game, that game. I want to see a little bit of piece of this team, that team, that team. Outside of Colorado, who I've watched, I kind of look at a lot of these teams and go, you sort of suck. You know, maybe I'm getting older. Maybe I don't know as many of the players as I used to, but a lot of teams I just look at and say, this is very mediocre and flawed. And we've already talked about the league being pretty flat in terms of talent and a lot of the league being pretty, what's the word here? Uneventful, fine, mediocre, a little plus from mediocre. But this year it really does feel like it's coming to a head. I know the cap's going up, but boy, oh boy, oh boy, does it feel like we're going to have this be a major story all season long?
Yeah, having the cap be almost flat for 4 or 5 years
it's coming
created. Yeah, well, because every team that kind of emerges as a contender or that's interesting,
immediately ruined.
They don't have anywhere to maneuver, and I mean, you don't have to look further than the Atlantic Division. You know, like we've had this situation where Tampa, Boston, and the Leafs have been good for 6 or 7 years, and that's been a storyline. And look how diminished Boston and Tampa look roster wise. I mean, the Lightning are really struggling. Goaltending's part of that, but it's not the whole story there. I mean, it's to the point where the Lightning really badly want to keep Alex Killorn, and they can't because the Anaheim Ducks can outbid them for a player who's been in the organization for, a decade? And that kind of stripping away of the depth of the teams that are, you know, the contending teams, it's not just happening to the Leafs, it's happening all over. And I know since the summer you were asking for kind of a take on, this can be your segue, but you take for, you know, the Leafs roster versus this year versus last year, and I think it's slightly diminished. And I think you can say that for basically every contender around the league, save for maybe a team like Colorado, which had a lot of injuries last year and really struggled with depth problems last year and is probably a little bit better than where they were a year ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, Tampa's conceded more goals than any team in the NHL this year, other than a shocking team that they're tied with, which is Carolina. And I know it's early, but this is not good for the game. I'm sorry. I like parity, and the NHL always had that with the Stanley Cup playoffs. That was kind of the drill, was you got in, more than half the teams got in. And then once you got to these things, there was great equalizer of goaltending and competitiveness, and these games would be great, and anybody could end up actually winning this thing, and all of a sudden the President's Trophy didn't matter, and just getting in could matter, right? Those fun LA Kings teams that we ended up watching, and now it's just across the league, where I'm watching the very worst teams in hockey, and I'm going, you're not that bad. Like, you're not the worst thing I've ever seen. And then I'm watching
San Jose is pretty gnarly if you get a chance to catch them.
I guess what? They play at 10:30, and I hate them, so no, they won't make a lot of games. In fact, I might even take those Leafs talks off because I don't want to engage with the San Jose Sharks this year. My point is I think that we've gotten to a really, really, really bad place in the game across the league where they're saying, hey, the skill is the highest. I want to have my competitive teams be able to remain competitive. I don't want the number one stories in Toronto to constantly be, can you keep the good player that you developed in-house in William Nylander? Are you going to turn on your player if he wants $1 million more and wants to get paid like, you know, the eighth man on an NBA team? And that you're seeing your roster turnover year over year over year, and you can't even enjoy 3 games of Max Domi because he makes $2 million, and you're already pulling your hair out going, what could you have done with that money? We lost Sam Lafferty, right? Like this, I don't think that these are healthy debates for the game. It sucks. And the 14 teams thing, I thought was a pretty jarring stat that I don't know how that doesn't end up at the desk of Gary Bettman and go, hey, aren't you a little embarrassed about this? Because this is pretty bad.
Well, yeah, they got their cost certainty. I mean, the Lafferty one is like he gets traded because he's making $375,000 more than the league minimum.
And the Leafs could obviously use him, right? Like, they don't want to trade Sam Lafferty. You think this is a team that wanted to remove that kind of a player? They're a couple of days away from calling up Pontus Holmberg to be their 4C or their 3C or whatever C, you know? Like, it's a nightmare. Anyways, so this nightmare has created this Leafs roster. I think that, yes, of course, decision-making, but some of them is like, well, what else could you have done? Trey Living tried to bring back Ryan O'Reilly. He didn't want to be here. He tried to bring back Luke Shen. Shen wanted a ton of money, and you end up with kind of a mash unit of a bottom 6, and it's a bunch of pieces that clearly don't fit at all. And we talked about it all offseason, and you kept bringing up Domi, as this is going to be a bigger sore spot for people than they're realizing, because the name is fun and the skill set on paper is great. But now you're watching them, and you get a couple of games, and he gets outscored 3-0 with Tavares and Nylander, despite those two guys looking red hot to start the year, despite Nylander looking like one of the best 10 players in hockey right now. I guess let's just start with this. What the hell do you do with Domi then? Because I don't know how, I don't see it. I've been trying to think about 25 different ways, and I don't know where you put him.
Yeah, this was my concern with him. I know there was a lot of excitement when they signed Bertuzzi and Domi to those deals, and felt like there's a reason why Max Domi has bounced around so much. I think this is his sixth team in 7 years. I think he's played all over the place. I do think that like he should look better than this. Like he should at least have a little bit more offensive creativity. Like the thing that Domi at least gives you is he's supposed to give it back at the other end of the ice. He's supposed to be able to produce some nice plays, but I think he's gripping the stick too tight, and it's kind of just spiraling on him already. It almost feels like, remember Nick Ritchie came in and just like nothing, he couldn't do anything for 20 games.
Great.
Didn't he have like 2 points in 20 games or something?
It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare.
Sheldon Keefe was calling him out after the game for having a good screen, and like they were just trying to like build up his confidence. And it feels like that could be, even though it's only 3 games, it feels like that could be where Domi's headed. And now he gets moved down the lineup, and the point you make about the pieces not fitting, I mean, it's something that we did talk about in July, and I thought that maybe this was just an unfinished roster, and they've kind of come into the year with an unfinished roster. And I think it would be okay if there were just 1 or 2 instances of that, but there's a lot more. Like I think the roster's unfinished on the blue line. The fourth line doesn't make any sense. The third line's struggling. Nyes really hasn't gotten going, in part because he's been on one of these zombie lines that isn't able to do anything. There's just a lot of examples when you look at the roster where it's like, this doesn't make sense. And you ask about what you do. I mean, if this continues with Domi, I mean, I think you give him a runway of 12, 15 games. If it becomes clear that there's just nowhere to really play this guy and it just doesn't make sense to have him here, they do need to push money out to bring money in. So something's going to have to go. And at least he's making, you said $2 million, he's making $3 million. He's making $3 million that you can push out and bring something else back in. So that gives you some flexibility, I guess.
Okay. I just want to, I'm just going to play devil's advocate with Domi here for a second. Okay. Because I don't think he fits. And I think that
I'm not saying he fits.
No. I don't think he fits. I'm saying I'd like to play devil's advocate for the other side, like the pro Domi side. Okay. If I'm Max Domi, I grew up in the Toronto Maple Leafs locker room. I probably dreamed my entire life of playing for this team. And I'm saying this now personally, like I actually feel a little empathy towards him because this has to suck, right? Like you mentioned the gripping the stick too tight and the Nick Ritchie thing. Like, yeah, Nick Ritchie was from here and he wanted to have big expectations here. He wanted to live in Toronto. With Max Domi, it's got to feel like tenfold, right? Nick Ritchie never got asked about switching to his dad's number when a guy left from town. Nick Ritchie's dad didn't walk down up to a stage with the biggest act in music outside of Taylor Swift, right? Like Ty Domi did. Max Domi's dad is, known to everyone in Toronto. Like, how many people don't know who Ty Domi is here? So you're playing for your boyhood team. You're playing in front of everyone who knows who you are, everyone who's expecting you to score, everyone who's expecting you to be great. And then you come out and you face your former team in the Montreal Canadiens, a high-event game, a season opener, and you play poorly. You can't get a couple of pucks out. And the very next day, there's images of your coach taking you aside, and you become a focal point media-wise of, hey, here's what we're trying to focus on with Max. Like, we want to make sure that he's not turning the puck over in the offensive end because then we're ensuring that we're not in our D zone too much, blah, 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 blah. Like, if there's one thing Max Domi has proven he can actually do is be a playmaker. He's someone who can put the puck on somebody's stick and create an advantageous opportunity for them. And I just don't know if 2.5 games in front of all of those Leaf fans, and with 13 minutes a night as his team is chasing hockey games is enough to really figure out what you have there. And then so now, to make matters worse, for a guy who's already gripping the stick too tight, you, as the head coach, have decided to demote him publicly, push up the kid in Matthew Nyes, who, I agree with the move, but now you've got a top 6 that looks great and a bottom 6 that has literally nothing that works. Like, nothing. There's no pieces here. You've got, Max Domi playing with a 19-year-old kid who's probably going to be back in the WHL on your favorite team a week from now, and Kalle Yarncroc, who's like I don't know what I'm doing down here. I don't know, I'm just like, I'm around. And then a fourth line that is currently getting 67% of their draws in the offensive zone, despite giving their center a 4-year contract to be a defensive player. Like, if I'm Max Domi,
Yes.
I'm feeling a little bit betrayed and hurt and confused and frustrated at the fact that I became the face of the roster not fitting, despite getting 25 seconds to produce with two of the best players on the planet.
So you want to see him with Matthews and Marner then? I mean, the problem is he's not good enough defensively to play in the situations that Keefe wants to play those two.
Yeah. I don't see any. The problem is you can't move Bertuzzi off that, and then you end up with Nyes in the similar situation as before, where it's like he's down on the third line with nobody that makes sense, and he's just lost. Ultimately, yeah, the left wingers don't make sense. They got, like, Domi doesn't fit. I'm saying he doesn't fit, but if I'm him, again, this is just a devil's advocate standpoint. If I'm him, I'm going, do you really think things are going to change for the better? Am I really going to have a shot at doing something if you're going to put me down on a third line with Fraser Minton and with Calle Yarncroke, where I'm not going to fit either?
I think what they need to do is create, and when they first signed Domi, the lineup I had created was create a third line that's offense first, that's offense
Agreed.
only. You're going to play it in the offensive zone. Put Domi at center on that third line. They're going to be bad defensively. You shelter the heck out of them, but they're a weapon for you out there. And I'm trying to think who you would want to put on that line.
I already know.
Give
Can I
him
tell
someone.
you?
Give him someone to play with that can put the puck in the net. That's
Yeah.
not Yarncroc and not Minton.
You know who it is? You send Minton back to junior because, yeah, it is what it is here. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. He's ahead of schedule. He was a good story.
Ready.
He's not ready to be
ready.
playing in the NHL every single night. He's got 2 shots in 3 games. Like, it's not happening right now, and it's obviously not going to be a key piece to their season moving forward. You put him down back in the dub with your beloved Kamloops team. You're so happy you get to watch. What's the pass called that you buy for that?
I think the Kamloops is rebuilding. I think they're trying to go for the top pick. They're like 1-6 or something to start the year.
So they're going to trade him.
Everybody.
Okay, so that's fine. Then they trade him. You don't get to watch him as much, and blah blah blah. You bring Robertson back up. You put Robertson on a wing. You put Domi down the middle. You put Yarncroc on the right side, and you call it the challenge line. And you say to those guys, you have the Fraser Minton 10 games. Figure it out, score some goals, produce, or all of you are out of here, except for Yarncroc.
I kind of liked Yarncroc up with Matthews and Marner. Like, I think
I don't mind it.
maybe
he's good moving around. He's fine. He's just one of those guys where, like, he looks okay wherever you put him. And yeah,
because I'm not 100. I don't know what you see, but I'm not 100% sure Bertuzzi fits on that line. I mean, they're giving it some rope to see if he can figure it out. But
I like him there.
Yeah, well, they got the net front piece of it, but I think that could potentially be an option if Bertuzzi plays, on one of those other lines. But yeah, I mean, I think you signed Domi. These are the pieces that you have. So create something that makes sense around him. I mean, the funny thing is that where Domi is the best is on PP1, and the Leafs just have no need for him there at all. Like, he's hardly getting any time on the power play, but that's where he's like, I think in a perfect world on a contending team, it's deceiving because you look last year and Domi plays in Chicago and plays tons of minutes, and it's like, well, that just doesn't make sense. But the way Dallas used him, where it was more like third line center, shelter the line, he was productive in that role. And I think that the Leafs, I mean, they signed him. They need to try and see if he can perform in a situation that makes sense. And I mean, I guess you could say, he had the 5 periods or whatever it was playing with Tavares and Nylander, but when the leash is that short and a guy's gripping the stick, I think it can spiral on him.
That's what I'm saying. I think it's unfair. I do. I think that 2 things can be true. That Domi has looked brutal so far, and he looks like the clear piece of the puzzle that does not fit. Well, he and Reeves both. Because it's like, we can like what Reeves is bringing, the intangibles. I believe in those things. I believe that Reeves is probably having that effect in the room. But I also know that they're getting caved in when he's on the ice, despite them starting at the other end of the rink. Like, it's just...
They're at like 29% of possession with that fourth line out there,
and they've been outshot double.
They've been outscored 3-0.
Yeah,
in three games.
Yeah,
so it's not good.
No, those 2 pieces. But that's the point. you're Brad Treliving. You brought these guys in. You got to have some kind of communication with the coach of going, hey, I brought these dudes here and I kept you as the coach. You got to use my guys. Like you can't have them, Reeves you can have on for 9 minutes. That's fine. I don't think Treliving brought Reeves in thinking that, he was going to play 13, 14 minutes a night. But Max Domi can't play 11, And if he's going to play 11, he's got to have them in some spots where he at least has an opportunity to succeed. And so for me, that's it. I get it. I understand Sheldon Keefe wanting more from Nyes. I want more from Nyes. I think Nyes belongs in the top 6. He's a better fit than Domi is with the top 6, unquestionably. But for Sheldon Keefe, I would say that this is actually a bit of my criticism with him going back years, every single year. I think that I don't think that for all the stuff we gave him, remember, what was it after, which game was it, the Ducks, when he came out and kind of hammered Marner, he benched him and people were like, oh, and he said the thing and then he had to walk back the quote. I think that was game 1 where he's like, what was it, something to do with a fire? We got to put out a fire. And people went, oh, Keefe, he puts his foot in his mouth. I actually think that the stuff with Domi, where instead of just going, this is a good player, he's fine, and letting him find his footing there, showing him a little bit of faith, I think that was genuinely a mistake for the long run, because now it just feels like he's so behind the 8 ball. The avalanche has already started to go downhill on Domi, and you know how it goes in this market and how it's going to go with this team with these expectations. It just feels like it's going to be impossible for him to climb back up the mountain.
I think the way Keefe views it is kind of like a challenge to the player, right? And does he rise to the challenge, or does he fold? And if it's someone who folds, then maybe he's not the right fit for. I mean, the Keefe also, you're right. He doesn't give very long leashes.
No,
to,
man, he's
to very many players.
McKee and I call him the tinkerer for a reason. Like, he's the tinkerer.
Yeah. Well, he could see. He's thinking back to watching preseason and what's not working, right? Like, he's not thinking that it's a 2-game leash for Domi. He's thinking, I didn't like what I saw from him at all the way through so far.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, I feel torn. I feel a little torn on it. I'm going, I don't know what Max Domi's doing here. If you can't play on your power play, and if he's so bad defensively, like Tavares and Nylander, that's not, like, I think that might end up being a story of the year, is that Tavares is not going to be super trustworthy in his own end. Like, some of the stuff that we've seen so far has been a little tough for him as well. So having those 2 guys with him just doesn't really work. But yeah, I don't think it's fair to a player. And what does it say for you too, a team that's going to continue to be capped out, right? You're going to have to keep trying to get these challenge players here in Toronto. That's clearly part of the model, right? You would agree that if you're going to keep these kind of players around here on these huge cap numbers, you've got to convince guys to do the bunting and the Domi and the Bertuzzi, whatever, dudes who have more skill, more talent, more ability than what they're getting on a contract. And I don't know if Domi actually was able to do much better than his deal, but tell them to come to Toronto, get to play with these players, and then get an opportunity to make their money next year. And if you're doing this to Max Domi right away, and Tyler Bertuzzi's playing fewer minutes than he has since the first year he played in the NHL, I don't think that's a good look for your coach. I don't think that's a good look for your organization, and it's something that I think needs to get sorted out amongst all of the ranks. Anyway, yeah. Do you want to talk about Reeves? Because I don't even know if there's a point. Like, he doesn't fit, and it's intangibles versus numbers. And it's kind of a fun debate. It's like, oof.
Yeah. If the lineup was, if they had a purpose-built line for him to play on that was kind of like get out there for 8-9 minutes and bang around the way that the Islanders do, then it would be fine. I didn't like the Reeves signing, not because I don't like the player or the person or what he brings. Is that he's going to be 37 years old this year. Like, his on ice impacts have clearly diminished a lot the last 3 or 4 years, and they've diminished from where he was a solid 4th liner to where he's not any longer. So, I think he's bringing everything that he can right now, but the problem is that he's playing with Kampf, who you gave a big contract to, who's making 2.4 to play, and Kampf's minutes are down, and hasn't looked effective because what is he supposed to do out there? Kampf made sense when you were playing him with Mikheyev and Engvall, and that was not the sexiest line, but it was a line of guys that could work hard and skate, and you put them in the D zone, and they ate all the defensive zone starts, and their goal was get the puck up the ice, get an offensive zone faceoff, then you get the big boys out there again. And that made sense. But right now, not only does Reeves not really make sense, it's the Kampf part that doesn't make sense. Like, they should have just They should have just not brought Camp back and like put Lafferty as center on that line and just have some grinding guys that played 8 minutes and then take the extra 1.3 million in cap space and do something else with it on your third line.
Yeah. Like, I think you and I have already talked about this either in text or on the show, but I think what happened was when Ryan O'Reilly left, they panicked and they went, we have to give Camp the money. We just have to.
There were no other centers.
Yeah, exactly.
There were no other centers. Like, they were like, what are we going to do?
Yeah, yeah. And then the panic trade has resulted in this. And again, it feels like a situation where you could have something with Yarncroc and Kampf, but then I still don't know who the left winger is. Like, I still don't know who's supposed to be there without removing someone on the roster. It's like, you letting Gregor play there? Like, is that what he does? I don't know enough about him. I've seen 10 minutes of him a night so far, and I don't know what he does really on that line yet. And I told you already, I don't watch San Jose Sharks games, so I'm Shaq. I'm sorry, young fella, I'm not familiar with your game. I need more time with Gregor before I know what he is, other than a really fun name to say who reminds me of what we do in the shadows. Anyway, all right, the blue line. So I think the forward groups don't fit, but at least I go, there's talent here and there's potential here and maybe there's a shakeup. I'm remaining a little optimistic about it. I think it's a little I don't want to say underrated. Damn it. I suck at words today. I'm not able to figure out the dictionary. I played Scrabble yesterday too. I should be better at this, but I don't really love that the blue line pairings are getting shuffled up in game 4. But the thing is it's pretty clear that McCabe and Klingberg wasn't working. Like, I think that's more clear than the Domi thing. So yeah, how important is tonight for these guys against a Panthers team that's good at all the things they're bad at, which is dealing with good cycle and good forecheck and 9 forwards who can come at you in waves.
Yeah, the blue line's actually been worse than I was expecting. Like, I thought they were going to be, and that's even with, I think, like, Riley and Brody have really settled in, other than Brody blowing the tire on the 1 goal against. He's been good.
He's been amazing ever since he blew that tire. Everything else has been basically vintage TJ Brody, and everyone who wrote him off of that blown tires, like, maybe I got to relax.
The analytics and the underlying numbers, Brody's number 1 on the Leafs right now.
Yeah, what an expected goals for, right?
Yeah, like, and he's at 67, 68%, which is like elite. It would make him one of the top D around the league. Yeah. So, and it's only 3 games, but it's a good sign that he looks as good as he does. But, the fact that the blue line's so scary, and it's really just the one pairing. Like, I think Liljegren's been fine. I think Giordano's been okay, but the one pairing has been a black hole, and I actually don't. I know there's, Klingberg's another guy that we're going to be having referendums about all year.
I love him so far.
Yeah, I don't think he's the problem. Like, he is what he is. The problem is that McCabe has been brutal, and he's not the fail-safe that you can play with Klingberg that I guess they were envisioning coming in. So, and the other thing, too, it's the same thing with, like, the Camp and the Reeves and the third line and all that is like, okay, so what's your options to switch it up? And, I was trying to find a way to get McCabe down on the third pair that made sense. The tough thing is that you look at it's funny, left wing and left D. You look at left D, it's like you're locked in with Riley at the top, but then you've got Giordano on the third pair. You don't really want him to play on the second pair because he's 40 years old. He's the oldest player in the league.
He played too much to start last year. That was the whole thing. He had to absorb too much ice, and then come playoff time, he looked like he'd been worn down to a nub.
Yeah. But so what do you do? And so I was playing around with it, and I was like, okay, potentially they have Timmins coming back at some point from his injury. I mean, you could break up Riley and Brody. Maybe you put Brody on the second pair, and maybe it's a Brody, Klingberg, Riley, Liljegren top 4, and then you get McCabe down there with put either McCabe or Giordano on the right side on the third pair, and say to McCabe, like, you got to get some stuff figured out because he's just running all over the ice. He's not great with the puck. It looks like McCabe's trying to play like he's Klingberg too, and then
that's the issue. That's the biggest issue with the team right now, James, is that, like, you're talking about how, hey, Keefe's working off of the preseason as well. I don't understand how McCabe, after coming here, and he was supposed to be a bit of an anchor defensively, right? They brought him in and they went, you're going to be part of the shutdown pairing of this team. Okay, that's your role here. We want you to be responsible. That he came into this year playing the way that he has. Like, it's the biggest point of confusion for me out of everything that we've seen through 3 games is what the hell are you doing, man? Like, it doesn't make any sense. You're playing with Klingberg. He's the guy that does the jumping up. You're the responsible one. What are you doing?
Remember, there was the one play where Klingberg is finding him for the breakout pass, and he's it's like this is all backwards. Like, what is going on here?
I don't understand. Like, I actually almost feel like get McCabe up to a podium and have the reporters, like, Keefe should just say, I'm not talking today. No one else is talking today. McCabe is talking, and you guys ask him what he's supposed to be doing out here. And he goes and stands in front of you, and then you guys run through like 4 or 5. Bourne does one of his video breakdowns. Bourne shows it, like, brings up the telestrator and goes, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this. Please explain what's going on here. Like, I don't get it. It's very, very, very confusing. So hopefully him going with Liljegren is something. I don't know. I'm nervous about it because it just hit me like a ton of bricks that the success of McCabe is pretty important to this team. Like, his cap hit is not something they can replicate. He's not a swap out player, and they can't really afford for him to be a third pairing defenseman. Like, it is what it is. They gave up first round picks for this guy.
Yeah, I mean, he might be. I thought he was like a number 4. Like, I think he's a second pair guy. If you play him with someone good, is going to be fine. I mean, maybe you try him with Brody again at some point, like they did in the playoffs. But you can't go. This is where the pieces don't really fit. You can't go Riley Klingberg. You know, like that's just. I mean, you might have to at some point, but
no, you can't do that.
So it's got to be Riley Liljegren then, and maybe Liljegren's ready for that.
But the last time they tried that, it was a nightmare.
Yeah, they just don't have a lot of options. And then you got Simon Benoit, who's doing the shuffle from the Marlies to the Leafs every day. Yeah. They send him up and down and up and down. And
well, good, because he's like the what is it? The athletic testing phenom, right? That's supposed to be his thing. He's great at the athletic testing. So good. He probably runs back and forth
across the hallway at the Ford Performance Center. Yeah. So, you know, it's not like, I mean, I guess it's like you're waiting for Timmins to come back and be the answer for you.
I'm good on that. That I'll leave that one for the internet. I'll let him be the hero of the internet. We've seen that. I've seen that story before, and I don't think I've ever been wrong. So yeah, I'm good with that. I'm with you. I don't. The blue line fits feel as scary, if not scarier, than the forward fits. I did want to ask you this. I don't know if you have an answer for it. It's kind of almost unfair to throw it at you, but do you have any sense about how the Leafs feel about the Minten decision?
I think that they're aligned with what you were saying earlier. I think that, he's only played the 3 games. Mm-hmm. He's going to be part of this road trip, and I think they'll probably decide after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But after the 3 games, I think that the lean would be he's going back. So unless there's some revelation here over the next, what's the trips, I think it's 5 games, unless there's some revelation over this road trip. Part of the problem is they don't really have another answer that they're comfortable with or that they like.
It's the only reason that he's here.
They're going to be back to
got to be here.
Yeah, they're going to be back to. I don't know. I mean, the options for what they do at third line center when Minten goes back, because I think it's when, not if, unless he scores like 2 goals tonight or on the weekend or whatever or something.
I don't think that there's he'd have to dominate.
I mean, maybe they're not generating any offense. Like he's good defensively. Like he's out there and he's in the right positions and he's winning faceoffs and like he doesn't look overwhelmed there. But that line with Minten on the ice, I think they have something like 1 expected goal in 3 games. Like it's like they're like last on the team.
Yeah.
So the options when Minten goes back for your third line center, I don't think Holmberg. Everyone's saying Holmberg can't play on the third line. Like they tried it last year, and then they ended up sending him down. Like I think Holmberg's a 4th line guy. So I think your options for third line center are Kampf, like they did last year, and try and build a defensive line like they had last year, or Domi, and try and build an offensive line around him like we talked about, or you try Nylander again. I mean, those are really the only options that they've got.
Yeah. For me, I would like to start putting Nylander in some situations where you take a look at it and see if he can handle it. But, you know, I was talking with Versteeg about this earlier in the week. It's tough because he is in a contract year and everyone was like, oh, the challenge. I'm like, no, man, he's playing great. He looks great. A, you don't want to mess with what's working. And B, if you're Nylander, I don't want to. I feel fine if I'm doing what I'm doing right now in terms of what I'm going to get paid. And I'm not looking to sacrifice when the organization hasn't put up the big bag of money. And if you're the organization, you almost don't want to put up the big bag of money yet because you want to keep him kind of enticed here, or at least the idea that potentially that could be a part of what he's doing. That said, I do think that in an ideal world, taking a look at Nylander now as the 3C, and having him be the face of that offensive line with Domi and having those two guys try to operate together, that's the best idea. I see it. And then put, Yarncroc and Nyes with Tavares. But I don't think they're going to do it. This secondary option to me would be, try the Domi thing at center with Robertson and Yarncroc and let it see if you can get something out of that. And then the last one is just Yarncroc camp, because you know what that is. I don't think that you need more time and testing to figure out that can work. And then I don't know who the third guy is there. Fine, Gregor. And then you make a fourth unit where it's like McMahon and Reeves, and they're together, and you kind of have the Bash brothers, and Holmberg is down the middle.
Right. And Gregor can play center, too. He played a little bit of center in San Jose last year. So, I mean, if it's just 8 minutes, put him at center. And
again, I've watched 3 games. I have no idea what he is. So, yeah. I have no clue.
The book on him in San Jose was he would create chances with his speed, but not be able to convert on a lot of them.
He converted right away. Scored the first goal of the season. That's all I know.
I know he did. And
he's a finisher.
It's one of all those Sharks fans were shouting about how come you never did that for us at the end of the season last year.
Yeah. Either way, that's the way I see the center. One of those 3 options, and here's what I'll tell you. None of them are all that sexy. I just wonder with the Minton decision if there's any thought, like he's going to go on the road trip. They can't back off it after 2 games. That's awful. They have to let him kind of play this out. But I did wonder if they think, maybe we should have just sent him back down to junior and known that this wasn't going to work out and let him have the high and the promise of that rather than exposing him in the NHL and making him feel like, oh crap, maybe I'm not as close as I thought. Like I just wonder if there is a bit of a psychological case. I'm a big believer of like, you should be able to swim, right? And that he's a mature kid. He's probably going to be all right, but smart gets a lot. And we've seen this happen to players before. And I would be, I was pro keeping Minton here, so I'm not going to change my opinion on it. I'm not going to like criticize the Leafs for doing it, but I just wondered if maybe there were some people in there that went, maybe it was just better to have him be confident down in the WHL rather than have him lose confidence in the NHL.
I mean, I've watched tons of him, and there was no way he was going to be ready. I mean, his second round pick, he didn't even light the WHL on fire last year. He's not a big time offensive player even in junior. I mean, the whole point of this year for him should be, you're going to be the best player on this Kamloops team that's not very good. You're going to play 21 minutes a night. You're going to be on the top power play unit. Go down there, be one of the leading scorers in the league, light it up, play for the Canadian World Junior team, and come back to us next year as, a really, really high-end prospect who's added another layer to his game. And the thing, I just never thought he was going to be able to make this work. So it feels like kind of like, what's the point? You've got these problems with your lines, and you're kind of just punting the decision deeper into the season by doing this. You're just waiting for the inevitable where you're going to have to decide what you're doing here.
I think they were hoping for a miracle, that he and Nyes were going to develop some kind of chemistry, and that they were going to have a little bit of an offensive push and be passable, and something where they would have gone, this is interesting. Let's take a look at it. But I think that what they have found out and what they're going to continue to find out is the stuff that you said, which is, it was just a really, really tough situation. I think that's the most depressing thing if you're looking at what the center options or how they feel about the other ones, is that they punted the decision hoping for a miracle from the 19-year-old kid that was the second-round pick, right? That they went, nah, we won't try Domi, we won't try Nylander, we won't try the camp connection with Yarncroc here. We won't bring up Holmberg. We're going to go with the Hail Mary. I mean, all credit to them, but not a great start when it comes to the puzzle pieces fitting. It would be great. It would be really, really kind of funny if this ends up being the best versions of Matthews, Marner, and Nylander we ever see at the same time, and then all the pieces around them end up being the worst they've ever had.
Well, I mean, it looks like a team that whatever trade or whatever acquisition they make over the course of the year is going to be really important.
Yep.
And it looks like a team that needs a top 4 defenseman, and it needs a top 3 center, probably a third line center. And they've got no cap space. They've got, as we talked about off the top, they're so capped out that they can only recall one player, and they're using it on Simon Benoit right now. Mm-hmm. they can't even shuffle in a bunch of Marlies up front regularly to like test a bunch of different people. I mean, that would be one of the other things I would look at. So it's going to be money out, money in to make an acquisition, and they really need to make two, and it's going to be a challenge because those are the marquee positions where teams are going to be looking to add at the deadline. So, there's lots of rumors that potentially the Leafs could make a trade long before the deadline, like maybe it's like a November or a December thing.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see if they can find something that makes sense.
I was going to say October 19th, deadline talk with the Leafs. We did it. New record. Beat that. Beat that other shows.
It's the only way they can make the lineup make sense, in my opinion. So, and in the meantime, I think that they should just, they need to experiment a little bit more and put some guys in different positions. And, I would look at moving Bertuzzi around the lineup a little bit, maybe try Yarncroc or Nyes up there with Matthews and Marner, because, whoever's there is going to succeed, right? So it's really about trying to get something going on the other lines.
James Mirtle, Senior Managing Editor at The Athletic. I hope that you still get to go to many, many drafts moving forward. Thanks for making time, buddy.
Me too. Thanks, JD.
Cheers, pal.